Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check them out online at tuscaloosatoyota.com. It's a busy time for Alabama athletics as the spring sports are gearing up for some postseason competition. Baseball still in the regular season. We have a lot to talk about here in Crimson Drive. We'll start today by going through our headlines for today, and they are brought to you by our friends at RJ Young. They are the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive, and they, of course, have furnished us with this smart board to go through all of the different headlines across Alabama athletics. We'll first take a look at what's coming up on the show today. We'll be hearing from Dan Waters, who is the head coach of the Alabama track and field program, as he'll be detailing what's coming up for Alabama at the SEC championships and the outdoor season, plus what's led to Alabama being ranked second in the nation for the men's track and field team. Then we'll be visiting with Austin Hannon. He is the sports editor of the Crimson. White really focuses his coverage on Alabama baseball and had a great piece earlier in the week talking all about Zane Denton, getting to know the Crimson Tide third baseman. So we have Austin coming up after that. Then we'll be focusing on softball for the rest of the show. First up, we'll hear from Montana Fouts, who, no surprise, is once again the SEC Pitcher of the Week. She'll give us some thoughts on her great last series against Mizzou, plus take a look at what's coming up for the Crimson Tide as they are actually underway in Gainesville right now in their first matchup in the SEC tournament. And our softball broadcasters, Tom Canterbury, Robertson, they'll be along to preview Alabama's run, what we hope is a very successful run over the next few days in Gainesville. So that's a look at what's coming up on the show. We will start our headlines with softball. Again, last weekend went 2-1 against Missouri. A really good close to the weekend, and that included a really special time for head coach Patrick Murphy getting inducted to the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame on Saturday night after a great win earlier in the day. The whole team got to be there, followed it up with another victory on Sunday. So great to see that for the Crimson Tide. Now they're starting their tournament time in Gainesville, and starting with Missouri. They just faced earlier in Tuscaloosa this past weekend. Now they get to face the Missouri Tigers once again after Mizzou picked up a win over Auburn yesterday. So it's Alabama against Missouri today, and then on to the semifinals Friday, and then on to the finals on Saturday. Montana Fouts, we mentioned, once again SEC Pitcher of the Week. And how about Ashley Prange? Yes, had that home run for the Crimson Tide. Certainly love to see that over the weekend. And yes, she has also been named to the SEC Community Service Team. So we love to see that for Ashley Prange. Let's talk some Crimson Tide baseball this past weekend. Alabama was at home against LSU, picked up a win in the Saturday game, but ultimately 2 losses out of the 3 games played against a very improved LSU team. And on Tuesday, the Crimson Tide made the road trip. The final midweek and final non-conference game of the season was up in Jacksonville against Jacksonville State, and the Crimson Tide picked up a big 13-3 win. Andrew Pinckney really set the tone for the game with a 2-run homer in the top of the first, and then later the game was completely broken open thanks to the bat of Zane Denton, who we'll talk more about with Austin Hannon coming up in a bit. But the man they call Zeus picked up a grand slam home run. Certainly looks good at the plate right now. Great pitching performances all throughout, including by the starter Antoine Jean, who was scoreless in his time on the hill. So you love seeing that for the Tide. Now this weekend, gearing up against a top 20 program, the Auburn Tigers, down at Plainsman Park. Here's the schedule for the weekend. Friday at 7:30, kind of a little later start on Friday, 2 o'clock on Saturday, and once again a little bit later on Sunday as the SEC Network will carry the Friday and Sunday games, SEC Network Plus on Saturday. But of course, here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, Chris Stewart and I will have radio coverage for all of these games with our airtime 5 minutes prior to the times you see here. So 7:25 coming up tomorrow, we'll be on the air from Auburn. A few other headlines for today. The track and field team we'll be hearing about in just a moment from Dan Waters. They're getting ready for the SEC Outdoor Championships. Men's team still holding on to that number 2 ranking. He'll explain that in a moment. And then women's golf earlier in the week picked up a victory. They finished number 2 as a team, but Polly Mack earned medalist honors at the NCAA Franklin Regional. So Alabama is heading to the national championships, and next week we hope to be joined by Mick Potter, the head coach of the Crimson Tide women's golf team, talking about the great performance that Polly Mack turned in, plus the Crimson Tide, I believe Benedetta Moresco finished 4th, so she was in the top 5 as well. Alabama's playing some really good golf right now, so we're looking forward to previewing what's coming up for Alabama at the NCAA championships after a successful week at the Franklin Regional. First things first, on the show today, we will hear from our friend Dan Waters, who's the head coach of the Alabama track and field team, as he'll discuss what is ahead for Alabama. We've seen some great results, and we've talked so much on this show about Bobby Colantonio Jr. with what he was able to do in the SEC indoor season. Also, Iliad Kipsang, who joined us earlier this year on the show. Hillary Chariot's performing at a high level. So we want to hear more about the Alabama track and field team. Here's Coach's Checklist with Dan Waters.
Obviously, this is, kind of where we've been focusing. It's track and field is unique because the regular season is just kind of preparation as you get to the postseason. So, if you want to put that in football terms, we're playing all 14 teams this weekend. So, we'll determine our record right here, right now. So we could go 14-0 or 0-14 this weekend. So it's kind of all right here on the line for us at the SEC Championship. So it's a very dynamic place. It's kind of a lot of fun, a lot of ups and downs. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, you build a really good team and they rank you really high. Every event and every performance gets a numerical value towards it. So like if you have the number one mark in the country, you'll get like 32 points for that, and then on down the line. And as every mark that we have has some sort of value. And then they just kind of add those totals up, and whoever has the highest total is ranked number one. Whoever has the second highest total is ranked number two. So basically it means that we've got a lot of guys that are really high on the national list in their individual events, and they're obviously the relays. So it just kind of gives us a lot of points to kind of in a lot of different places. It was one of the goals as I came here 11 years ago, was to build a complete rounded program and have people in every event, and that's kind of what we're able to see. So we have great 100-meter guys all the way to 10,000s, from the hurdles to the steeplechase to the hammer to the javelin to the triple to the high, you name it. We've got somebody probably competing in it. Well, let's take it one thing at a time. I'm worried about this weekend. Obviously it's gratifying. It's just, it kind of shows our potential. I've always said that, for the last 7 years, we've had rosters that have been phenomenal and had some great things. I think we've been ranked in the top 10 for a very long time now either one time in our season over the last few years. So, the program's been kind of quietly trying to build ourselves into national contention. I think we're maybe knocking on the door at this point, but the thing about track and field is it's a very fickle, sport, meaning that anything can happen. There's 21 different events, so a lot can transpire over a weekend, whether it be at conference meets or regional meets and national meets. So we're just going to try to focus on what we can do this weekend, which is compete to our very best of our ability, have a scorer's mentality going through the SEC championships, see where that goes, and then talk about the next thing, which is regionals, which is kind of your workman's meet, trying to get through it, and then try to see if we can pull off something crazy good in Eugene.
Roll Tide to Dan Waters and the Crimson Tide track and field team, hoping to compete for an SEC championship coming up this weekend. We'll have more on that coming up in next Thursday's edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Right now, we'll shift gears to baseball, where the Crimson Tide baseball team had that midweek win earlier at Jacksonville State. That game featured a grand slam home run for Zane Denton, who before that, the day before, Austin Hannon of the Crimson White student newspaper here at the University of Alabama, wrote a really long profile on Zane Denton, talking about his rise from playing in the Little League World Series, not the College World Series, but as a Little Leaguer, Zane Denton was able to play on ESPN, make some great plays as he was able to play in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Makes the decision to join Alabama, and he's had a terrific 3-year career, so we really take a deep dive into Austin Hannon's reporting on Alabama third baseman Zane Denton, and of all times, we get to talk to him on his birthday, as you'll hear in just a second, but I think you'll enjoy this conversation on Crimson Tide Baseball with Austin Hannon. Austin, it's great to see you as we record this interview on your birthday. Happy birthday, man. How's everything going?
Appreciate that, Roger. Thank you.
Well, it's certainly been a good stretch for you, writing articles and editing, of course, the Crimson White, and especially on Monday, we got to see the article headlined "The Book of Zeus," really detailing the personal story and the baseball story of Alabama third baseman Zane Denton. Just what can you tell us about the story, how it came together, and the work you've been doing the last few weeks to tell this story?
Yeah, it's been a good time in the works. Zane's kind of this guy that I grew up with him, so I'm sure that's kind of a thing that you could kind of get some details out of that with his high school and middle school. And so I got to know him, and I got to see kind of this kid that grew up and never really was like an outgoing guy. So his story was never really told. obviously the people that he was close with and everybody around, the area knew that his father passed away back in, I think it was 6th or 7th grade. So all of college, there had been no really, I guess, look into his life. And, there's been plenty of feature stories about other athletes at the school. And I thought, hey, I think we can really do something good here with Zane's. So I was able to reach out to him and get to talk to his brothers and his mom. And I got to talk to Coach Bo about it. And they all kind of put great input into it. And it turned into a great story. So, yeah, long time in the coming, because, I kind of had this idea earlier in the spring, and then I was covering basketball, and then the baseball season started, and then so all this stuff was happening, and I kind of had to push it off. But now that everything's kind of quieted down, I got to put it out there, and I think a lot of people enjoyed it.
Yeah, you did a really good job with it. And if you could just kind of take us through the journey he's had and anything you learned that maybe you didn't know before, but after speaking to his family or Coach Bo, that you ended up learning about Zane, because he is a pretty quiet guy. You're not going to get much right out of him.
Right. And it's so weird because this is a guy that's had, everybody knows Zane, right? It's all growing up, everybody knew Zane as that baseball guy. Like you think of baseball in Brentwood, Tennessee, it is Zane Denton. And so trying to like kind of dig deep with him and figure out like why he was so like shy and like so humble. It was like you're one of the best baseball players to ever come out of our high school. And yet here he is, nobody even really knows because he just acts like any other guy that's walking around the halls. So I think he was the top rated third baseman in Tennessee. He had offers from Tennessee, Auburn, Clemson, South Carolina, you name it. And he put his sights on Alabama. And I was like, why? And he said, Coach Bo and me had a great relationship because I think Hannon had started recruiting him when he was at Auburn as an assistant. And then when he came over to Alabama, he kind of finished him off in the recruiting process. And Zane really wanted to play for Alabama. He didn't get drafted, which was another big thing that he had to kind of live through in his high school life because Bryce, his older brother, was a second-round draft pick straight out of high school, committed to Vanderbilt, but went straight to the Cardinals organization. And it's kind of like, Zane, are you going to be that guy? And everybody was looking at him like, are you going to do the same thing? And so that also stacks up with his dad passing away, and now his brother's looking like he's going to be one of the best players in the Cardinals organization in years to come. And it's like, what can you do for us? He's already gone to the Little League World Series, and he decides, you know what? I didn't get drafted, but I think he told me that, Alabama's the place for me, and I think I want to stay there, work on my body, work on my talents all the way around, become a better fielder, and he kind of has become all of that since he's been in Tuscaloosa his freshman year.
Yeah, he really has gone through that journey as a college baseball player. And of course, you put out the article on Monday. It's a grand slam on Tuesday night. We may be starting to see some of the best Zane Denton baseball coming up the next couple of weekends.
Interesting thing. I actually texted him last night. I said, don't want to be that guy or anything, but did my story have any impact on how you played tonight? He actually said, you know what? It did, because, reading that story kind of made me remember why I played this game. That kind of touched me. So yeah, it was great to see him hit that last night. And yeah, he's a huge part of this Crimson Tide lineup and really going to be needed down the stretch here.
So again, Zane Denton, an important part of the Alabama baseball team. Make sure you check out Crimson White for the Book of Zeus story that Austin wrote earlier in the week. But you've been covering this team all throughout the season. Just what are some of the big takeaways you've had from this year of Alabama baseball, and what could be on the horizon in two huge weekends coming up at Auburn, then home against Arkansas?
Yeah, it seems like for the most of the year, Bohannon had been talking about it. The starting pitching was spectacular, right? It was consistency week in, week out from McMillan, from Hitt, and really from Jacob McNary at times. So that was kind of their stronghold, and that kind of fell off these last few weeks. And then the lineup has always been kind of a give and go kind of thing. It's either hot or it's not. They've got the bats to do it. And coming into the season, everybody knew that this Alabama team was dangerous, right? They had the run last year in the SEC tournament and into the NCAA tournament. And so there was a lot of expectations. And I think just sort of like the basketball team this past year, we got kind of too excited maybe because of the early success by Oates and by Bohannon. And so we kind of expected the baseball team to just be dominant in a gauntlet SEC, which is just not really possible at this time. Early on in his career. So the lineup's getting it going, especially last night. I think they had 18 hits. Auburn's going to be a challenge. Obviously, they've been playing great ball the last few weeks. They're up to number 20. And then, of course, everybody knows how good Arkansas is. But if you can maybe pick up a couple games there, you'll probably get to Hoover. You never know what will happen there. And they're sitting right on the edge of the NCAA tournament right now. And that would be huge for Bohannon and this whole baseball program if they can make it for a second year in a row.
What have you thought of the rise this season of Andrew Pinckney? Because he's been able to make some outstanding plays defensively all throughout his Alabama career. Now he's getting the hits and the home runs to go along with it.
Yeah, and early in the year, we used to ask him, about all of his fielding plays because that was his thing. And I asked him in a press conference earlier this year, what do you rather do? Because it was a game when he threw a guy out from right and then he also hit a home run. He said, I think I actually like throwing the guy out at third more, which I thought was kind of funny. But yeah, his bat, man. I mean, and it kind of started slow, but then SEC play, believe it or not, is when he kind of started picking up the hot bat. And here we are. He's probably, if not one of the best players on the team now, fielding and hitting. So yeah, he's really become something for the Alabama team. And I think he's going to even just get better as the year goes on in the next year.
Well, this year you've been the sports editor of the Crimson Whites, and not just only covering Alabama baseball, but you've been around at all the basketball, football games as well. Just what's this experience been like for you this season and getting to cover all these different sports for the school newspaper?
It's unbelievable, Roger. I mean, I grew up an Alabama fan. My dad's a graduate. And so, I mean, I've been growing up coming to Tuscaloosa and going to all the games. And just, I think the thing that I kind of had to pinch myself at times is like what I'm doing. Like, this is crazy. Like a little Austin would be just mind blown right now about all the access I get and all the people I get to talk to. So it's really, really cool. It's been just an unbelievable experience that they've given me over there at the Office of Student Media. They do great things and they've sent me to great places and I've gotten great opportunities. And I couldn't be more appreciative and thankful for them and everything I've gotten to do so far.
Any kind of moments stand out? Maybe like talking with Paul Feinbaum on the SEC Network.
Yeah.
That had to be a great day for you.
Yeah, and that's officially gone down as the scariest moment of my life. I mean, as soon as, we're just sitting there and it's okay. This is Paul. I've met him before. He said, all right, you ready? I said, yeah, I'm ready. And then bink, the lights are on right in my face. I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm on live TV. And it's one of those things where you're thinking about, I can't mess up, which about being a play-by-play broadcaster. But yeah, that was surreal. And I got to go to the national championship, which was really cool, albeit the result of the game. But it was, crazy year I've had. I started about a year and a half ago, and here I am. So I've got to do a lot of things, and there's been a lot of bumps along the way, but also a lot of very, very cool experiences I got to see.
Well, you'll once again be covering Alabama athletics for the Crimson White coming up this fall. Just what are your goals for the paper and what our fans can expect throughout the rest of this spring sports season as well as into next fall?
Yeah, I think coverage of everything. I think what you guys do a good job of. I've tried to do a good job of getting, all of our writers on every single beat that's out there just so that everything kind of feels covered. Because my first sport was women's soccer, which you obviously know some about. So I just want people to know that you can get to where I'm sitting right now if you just kind of climb the ladder and cover everything you can cover, get your hands on everything you can get your hands on. And so that's the goal there, hoping for a good football season, a lot of content, should have a really good team this year. So yeah, just trying to cover everything, trying to give everybody opportunities so that they can follow in my footsteps and get to do all the things I did.
Well, look forward to it. Austin Hannon, who earlier this week wrote the Book of Zeus, detailing the personal and baseball story of Zane Denton, Alabama third baseman. Great work there, Austin. And thank you so much for joining us here on Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Thank you, and roll tide.
Roll tide.
Fun conversation with Austin Hannon. All the best to him. Again, you can catch his work in the Crimson White, especially that Zane Denton profile was extremely well done earlier this week. Well, right now, I know many of you are anxiously waiting Alabama softball starting its run in the SEC tournament because the game before is still going into extra innings. We thought we would be on the air already. Tom and Gray out in Gainesville for Alabama's first game against Mizzou in the tournament. But again, the previous game is running long, so you have plenty of time to catch up with what's ahead for us. The rest of the show will all be about softball, starting with some comments from Alabama's Montana Fouts. Certainly pitched well this past weekend, helping Alabama to 2 wins against today's opponent, Missouri. She was named the SEC Pitcher of the Week, and now she joins us for the Players Checklist. Montana Fouts detailing what's important for Alabama leading into the SEC tournament.
I think our mindset is just taking one game at a time. Like you said, it's a clean slate, so nobody's got any pressure on them at all. So I think just going in there and more than one game at a time, we're going to take one pitch at a time because I feel like that's when we play our best games and we're just having fun with each other. I think the only way to prepare really is just practice our hardest and kind of make practice really hard because they're both great teams and they both are going to give us a fight just like we'll give them one. So I just think that we prepare for our game and then whichever team we play, then we'll figure it out from there. It's definitely momentum. The SEC tournament is so much fun and we love playing it every year. Last year we got to host, which was awesome, but we're excited to go down to Gainesville and think it's great because the SEC is the best conference, and I think playing each other all year and then facing each other in postseason is a great matchup. I think it just prepares so much just because it's just kind of like a little different level. It's like little bit extra giddy up, I guess you can say. So I think our team's excited because we are new and we have some younger girls, so just it'll get them ready for regionals and supers. I feel great. I feel the best I have all year. You know, I feel like the more we play as a team, the better off we get. So I think that goes for us individually as well. So I'm excited.
So that was Montana Fouts earlier in the week talking about the past success for the Tide plus what's coming up before Alabama made the trip to Gainesville. As you can see, that was recorded at Rhodes Stadium here in Tuscaloosa, but recorded in Gainesville earlier today. Tom Canterbury as well as Gray Robertson, our outstanding softball broadcasters, were able to tape a preview of what's coming up for Alabama in the SEC tournament. And again, the game has not started just yet in Gainesville, and we appreciate Tom and Gray joining us to give us a preview of what's ahead for Alabama in Gainesville in the SEC tournament.
Thank you very much, Roger. Tom Canterbury alongside Gray Robertson coming to you from Gainesville, Florida, as we get set for the SEC tournament. Alabama softball going to take on Missouri here in just a few minutes as you watch Crimson Drive. And Gray, Alabama coming off of a series victory over Missouri last weekend to finish off the regular season. So the Tide coming into the tournament on a high note.
Yes, and boarding has never been easier, just copying and pasting stuff from last weekend. Yeah, Alabama certainly played well enough in that Missouri series. Montana Fouts was incredible. The big story of the last few weeks has been the timely hit, and it came in game 2 off the bat of Abby Dorr, 2 RBI single. Game 3, it came off the bat of Ashley Prangy, a home run that has been discussed all week, and I'm sure will come up a lot during the various broadcasts today. And the Tide, did what Missouri couldn't. The big story of the weekend for the Tigers was 0 for 20 in all 3 games with runners in scoring position. Alabama's numbers weren't a ton better, but they were better, and that's why the Tide got the series win.
Alabama coming off of last year, of course, winning the SEC tournament, chance to kind of come back here and repeat that feat today. But it's a series against Missouri that has been very nip and tuck. It was an absolute war in Tuscaloosa last weekend. Missouri won game 1 before Alabama came back and won game 2 and 3. But historically, this is where Alabama shines. The SEC tournament, having won 6 tournament titles under Patrick Murphy, Alabama has never at least won 1 game in this tournament. But this is the first time Alabama's ever faced Missouri in the SEC tournament.
Yeah, and Missouri went on that great run last year to the semifinals in the SEC tournament, and they're starting to play like we thought they would. You picked them second in your preseason poll. I think I had them 4th. We believe that this was a team that could win the conference, and they're starting to show that ability right now. But you're right. Alabama has thrived in these situations. We've seen Montana Fouts play in 2 SEC tournaments. Both times she's at least made the championship game. Last year, of course, a Herculean performance, pitching all 3 games, setting the SEC tournament strikeout record. She is at her best in these moments when the pressure is on her. And we should say we still don't really know what's up with Lexi Kilfoyle. She's day-to-day. We're not sure if she'll be able to go this weekend. But Montana has thrown her best ball when Lexi has been unavailable throughout her career. And so I think that you add all of that together, you add in a little bit of the extra juice coming into this Alabama-Missouri game, and I think we're going to see Montana do something special.
That's what I was going to say, because, with the uncertainty of Kilfoyle, it may be necessary for Montana Fouts to do that again this year if Alabama gets where they want to go. Overall, how much does the SEC tournament play into the NCAA seedings that are coming up on Selection Sunday coming up this weekend?
Oh,
unbelievable. Yes.
What the heck? I'll tell you what, it varies every year. Some years we see the committee put a ton of value on this tournament. And why not? It's for the most part the most visible softball you get from the SEC all year long, with all of the coverage SEC Now sets. There are 3 different radio broadcasts happening for our game today. So the committee does put a lot of stock into it, but I think at the same time, I'm not sure anybody can be outright just flat out helped by this tournament in more ways based on what they've done in the regular season, if that makes any sense. I think the only team who can really gain a bunch of ground is like a Tennessee, who's on the bubble of hosting supers. If they win this tournament, they'll be a lock. But everybody else is pretty much set where they are, especially Alabama. And Missouri right now, I've got them just out. A win today might put them in as a regionals host, but it's so tough to tell this early in conference tournament week because we don't know what UCF is doing. We don't know what Notre Dame is doing. So there's a lot at stake for those teams. But for teams like Alabama, you're pretty much good where you are, win or lose, but you'd love to shore up the resume a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. We're here. Might as well win the thing.
I mean, I don't want to go home.
Right, yes. So
I packed for 4 days.
Right, certainly the plan. Again, Alabama's taking on Missouri this afternoon on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. And as well, you mentioned the other conference tournaments that are going on. Alabama is probably set somewhere in, where do you think?
I've got them at 5 right now.
Right.
I will say, I think that one scenario that could help Alabama move up is if they were to win this tournament and beat Arkansas. I've got Arkansas at 4 right now. I think that you could see that head-to-head factor be an emphasis when seeding those two teams.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, Alabama's pretty safe where they are. It just depends on where they go up and down. And, those results really aren't contingent on any other conference tournament. It's actually what happens out in the Pac-12, who's playing their final regular season series.
So you can get Gray's full bracketology on the Out of the Box podcast at @OutofTheBox_pod on Twitter, anywhere you get your podcast.
And also, during the game,
yes,
when we, of course, have to wait a bit because nothing is ever done in the 2.5-hour window.
Probably not. Yeah. So we will certainly talk about that more, and you can hear that on the podcast and also on the broadcast. But just a quick overview of your bracketology.
Well, right now, Oklahoma's the 1 seed. Locked and loaded.
Yeah.
The battle for the 2 seed is between Virginia Tech and Florida State. I think potentially Alabama could have an argument if both of those teams lose early in the ACC tournament. Alabama wins this one, but I think it would take a lot. And then I've got Arkansas 4, Alabama 5, UCLA, Arizona State, those 2 Pac-12 teams that could potentially jump Alabama. But I think the better chance would be Arizona State, not UCLA. They're at 6 and 7. And then you've got Tennessee, Oklahoma State, and Duke still in the mix somewhat to be that number 8 seed. But I do feel, and I felt this way for about a week now, Alabama is safely hosting Supers 100%. Anything else, and I would be flat out stunned. And I would have to reevaluate what I look at, because everything that the committee's based these decisions on the last few years says Alabama will be a top 8 seed and probably top 6.
Yeah.
But then again, we've been throwing some curveballs in the past, so might as well take care of your business.
Absolutely. We talked about Montana Fouts, but who do you think offensively for the Crimson Tide this week is going to be very key to Alabama hopefully making a big run in this tournament?
Allie Shipman. Ship has been great this year, but she hasn't been driving in the runs of late. And part of that is because people ahead of her haven't been getting on base. We've seen Ashley Prangy do well in the leadoff spot, but what are the most memorable hits? They're home runs. And a lot of them have been the solo variety since she's been up at the top spot. So Allie Shipman really hasn't had a chance to drive in runners. But Alabama this year is 21-2 when Allie Shipman has an RBI. And I think if she can really get rolling, if she can get the timely hits, if she can be that person who has that clutch moment in the box, Alabama can make a run. And they might not need Montana Fouts to be perfect because of what Allie can do, and also behind her Bailey Dowling, because Bailey has been swinging it well. And if Allie drives in a run, she's on second, Bailey can drive her in 2, and then all of a sudden you've got a crooked number.
Yeah. So that's coming up this week. Alabama taking on Missouri this afternoon, and then hopefully semifinals on Friday and the championship game on Saturday. It's the best time of year.
This is like Christmas. I've got 5 Word documents already up behind this Zoom. We're ready to go. And I sure hope we can stay a while, not just because, of course, I want to see Alabama win this tournament and play well, but it's just fun to be here and to watch all the softball. We saw Georgia Ole Miss last night. Great game. I can't wait. Let's get it rolling.
Let's go. So for Gray Robertson, I'm Tom Canterbury. Join us for Alabama softball all week long as Alabama competes in the SEC tournament here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Back to you, Roger.
Now, again, had we known the schedule with Mississippi State and Tennessee, their game would go so long. They're now in the 12th inning, so Alabama still hasn't played. We would have been able to maybe zoom in Tom and Gray live here onto Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, but as they're still waiting to go on the air, getting set for Alabama against Missouri in the first round for the Crimson Tide in the SEC tournament, before Alabama hopefully moves on to the semifinals tomorrow and then the championship game on Saturday. But again, listen to those guys as soon as we're done, and we're almost done here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network for Crimson Drive. Tom and Gray will be calling Alabama against Missouri as the Crimson Tide begin their journey in the SEC softball tournament coming up very shortly. That's coming up again shortly here on the network. Let's take a look at the rest of the CTSN schedule for this weekend. So again, softball in the SEC tournament was scheduled to begin at 1:30 earlier today, but they have still not hit the air with the first game running long in Gainesville. But make sure you listen to them after we're done with this show. Coming up tomorrow, their game will be scheduled for 2 p.m. in the semifinals of the SEC tournament. Then the baseball team will start its 3-game series on the road at Auburn. A really critical series for baseball, last road series of the year. Alabama and Auburn starting tomorrow at 7:30. Our radio airtime will be at 7:25 as Chris Stewart and I will have all the play-by-play for you down on the Plains. That includes a quick turnaround for the Saturday game at 2 p.m. at Plainsman Park. And then softball in the SEC tournament, that would be on Saturday, the championship game coming up at 4 p.m. No chance of a delay there, I guess in case of weather. But we will look forward to Alabama hopefully being back in the championship game, trying to win back-to-back SEC tournament titles coming up this year. Then the baseball team will wrap up the weekend at 3 p.m. start time against Auburn on Sunday. And then after that, the Tide baseball team will be home starting next Thursday against Arkansas, after we have our next edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. But that is going to wrap up this edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Again, check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. Special thanks to our broadcasters, Tom Canterbury, Gray Robertson, for their help in previewing Alabama softball in the SEC tournament. We appreciate the comments as well of Montana Fouts, and Dan Waters, the head track and field coach for Alabama, previewing the outdoor championships. We'll be talking more about that next week here on Crimson Drive. And we also have to say a big thank you to Austin Hannon of the Crimson White, the sports editor, for joining us and talking Alabama baseball. Last but not least, thanks to Ethan Carabin, our producer, for putting this fine show together, and thanks to all of you for watching Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. This is Roger Hoover signing off on this Thursday afternoon. Now enjoy some Alabama softball later today. Baseball coming up this weekend. It's a great time to be with the Crimson Tide. Till next week, so long and roll Tide.